Hey everyone, this is Ali Amagasu welcoming you to the latest episode of Cloud Unfiltered. Today's guest is yet another person from the Cisco DevNet organization. His name is Ashley Roach, and he is the principal engineer and evangelist, or a principal engineer and evangelist on the DevNet team. Welcome, Ashley.
Hey, thanks for having me.
Thank you for joining us. I appreciate you coming right on the heels of another DevNet interview, but I think you're going to have some things to add that your colleague Hank did not. So I appreciate you joining us anyway. And
Yeah,
let's start
no
by
worries.
finding
You
out,
bet.
let's start by finding out how you got into tech.
Yeah, so my story is a little unconventional, I guess. I don't have a formal CS degree or anything like that. A lot of what I've learned is basically self-taught. Having said that, I did take a couple of computer science classes in university. But ever since I was a little kid, my dad has been kind of interested in computers as they evolved. And so I had a Timex Sinclair. That was, I remember, my first computer, and that was like you recorded your state was stored on a cassette that you plugged into an old TV, and had to go to channel 3 and all that kind of stuff. All the way through sort of Apple IICs and then IBMs, and kind of now we're back to the Mac world. So along the way, I learned more basic stuff, logo and all those kinds of things. And then more when I got into college, I got more into sort of the programming side of things. So I took those couple classes that was like C, and so that was really cool. And I got into sort of networking things with that. We were like networking our computers together to play Doom in our dorm. So that was very nerdy, but fun. And then one of my buddies, actually from college, he actually works. I think he works at Salesforce now. He does like identity management. So Ian, I ran into at one point, and I said, "Hey, man, I was at the Mac user group meeting, and the Mac user group meeting, they had this thing called Gopher 2, and Gopher 2, they were loading images in like the browser, the Gopher browser." And he said, "Oh, okay, you think that's cool? Check out this thing like called the World Wide Web." it's actually like much more interesting than Gopher. So I said, "Oh, well, I'm just learning sort of some of this programming stuff. What's the deal?" And he said, "Oh, it's pretty straightforward. You should be able to learn it." So at the time, I actually had been in France like right before that. I spent a semester over there, and then I wanted to get a job where I could kind of combine some French with technology while I was still in college. So there was a local or an institute as part of the university that was focused on sort of like French-American relations. And sure enough, they wanted someone to build a website. So I said, "Hey, I don't know how to do that, but I can learn." And they were like, "Sure, that's cool." So basically I had this college job where I taught myself and learned that stuff with like Mosaic browser and really all the archaic stuff. So I'm obviously dating myself, but yeah, that's been kind of the evolution. And then after that, I did 2 jobs as like a system administrator. One of them was out here in Denver. We set up the first network for historic photo preservation within Colorado, called the Photo Digitization Project. So if you go to like the Denver Public Library website, you can go browse now. It's all web-based. And it was funny because when I went there, I was like, "Hey, why are you doing this like weird network thing? Why don't you do it just over the web?" And they're like, "Oh, well, this was what we did the grant for. So we have to complete that part of it." So I actually built like an e-commerce platform for that, which was, sorry, it sounds way better than it actually was, which was basically a form that they could submit and say, "Hey, I want to buy this thing," and then we would call them, because none of the infrastructure for doing credit card processing was available at that time. So we just, took the orders manually. But yeah, that kind of evolved, and then ended up moving to Vermont and got a system administrator job up there, and then ran basically the network and PCs for a small university. And then I came back to Denver, did business school. So I have an MBA around, entrepreneurship, basically. And then joined 2 startups, tech startups, before I joined Cisco. So I was at Jabber. I was one of the server product managers, or I was the server product manager for a couple of years there before I left. And then I went to a company called NewsGator, and I was doing product management there around our kind of enterprise integration with SharePoint. So, and then when I was over there, Jabber got acquired by Cisco, and I had some connections there. And my boss was like, "Hey, you want to come, do the Cisco thing?" I was like, "Okay." So I'd never worked in a big company really, other than government stuff, and I was like, not sure I'd last that long, honestly, because I was like, I don't know, it's going to be slow and whatever. But it turned out to be pretty cool. I started in Collab, and then when DevNet was spinning up, I moved into DevNet and kind of was one of the first hires there to help build DevNet out. So it's been fun to get to this point now where we're really cranking. Okay, so that was kind of
on that. I hear you on that. Joining the big company and worrying that it's slow. I don't want to be a total Cisco promo, but I came here when Cisco acquired MetaCloud 4 years ago.
Okay, yeah.
And same thing. I thought I was leaving right away. I was like, I'm not going to stick around and be part of that enormous corporation. But it has been, and I've worked at a lot. I've actually worked at a lot of big companies, and it's been one of the best groups of people that I've ever worked with. And it doesn't move as quickly as a startup, but I think it has a lot of excellent upside that offsets that.
Yeah.
So
yeah, I agree. Like, we're at home.
Exactly. That makes a big difference. So, I did interview your colleague, Hank Preston, for our last show, as I mentioned. Yeah. And he explained that he works on the infrastructure, developer space within DevNet. And he explained that you're in more the app developer space. So I'm hoping you can talk a little bit about what's going on there, what you guys are doing to work with developers or with network engineers that want to understand more about development and want to get involved with DevNet. If you could talk a little bit about that, that would be terrific. And later we'll talk about your podcast, because I know that's something you're passionate about as well.
Yeah. So the application developer space is interesting. So, to be totally transparent, I mean, when we go to hackathons or we go to events, people often ask us, like, why is Cisco here? if we're at a true application developer one. And, for a certain period of time, it was like, yeah, well, you guys need servers and stuff too, right? But, more and more, we've been able to build up, I think, a more interesting portfolio that can support, that are more platform oriented for application developers. So, MetaCloud, was kind of one of those first forays, I think, into that space. We've got, but we've also got, in collaboration, Cisco Spark and the capabilities there. But then, you flip around to Meraki, and Meraki has kind of interesting stories around doing indoor location and location analytics and all this sort of stuff. So, as we kind of thought and matured, I think, in DevNet, when we started, we're like, hey, we have an audience, right, of Cisco, CCIEs, CCNAs, people that are passionate about infrastructure and the capabilities that we offer. But we also want to reach out to application developers to create kind of interesting solutions, not just on those things, but combining lots of other technologies as well. And so, what we've done and we're kind of soft launching this, is we've created an application developer area on our website, and that area we basically have crafted around use cases. So if you're building, web development projects where you want to do things like embed video into your application, and not like YouTube type video, but this kind of video, right, where you're interacting with another person, or you're wanting to look at kind of real-time streaming of a camera in some location, then we have capabilities with the Cisco Spark SDK, as well as some other, of the security kind of SDKs and APIs that are out there, so that a web developer could integrate that sort of thing. Similarly, with Meraki, we have people that when you think of, if you're an app dev and you're like, hey, I'm interested in building something with location in a retail context, they may or may not come across Cisco, right? Because for various, they may not even think of Cisco because they're like, I'm an application developer. I think of Microsoft, Google, Apple, Amazon. Those are the ones we think of first,
right?
And then oh, Cisco's got some stuff too. So we're trying to break through there, right? We're trying to make it compelling and interesting to those developers. And so if you want, I can give you a peek of the website, just kind of walk through it a little bit, or we can keep talking as well.
No, I think it's fine. Let's take a peek. For folks who are listening to this, I apologize. Don't tune out. I think Ashley can probably do a good job of describing what they're showing on the website.
Yeah. So like I described a little bit a moment ago, I'm going to hide this thing. Whoa, nope, I am not going to hide that. Come back. Where did it go?
Well, I can see I can see your screen. I can see the website. Oh, I could. I could there.
It flipped. No worries. Okay, cool. So like I said, what we wanted to do is say like, hey, application developers, you can actually build apps with Cisco technologies, right? And we have, this is not exhaustive. We wanted to just start with kind of the ones that we think are the most interesting and the most consumable. So things like, a web developer, or if you're a mobile developer, or if you're doing things in IoT, chatbots, that's a big emphasis for, the Spark platform. And that's also a big trend in the industry, and so on. So what we do is we kind of preview a couple of these technologies. So things like here we have embedding video calling within a mobile or web app. We have app dynamics capabilities. So if you want to monitor the performance of your app, in mobile, we have things like being able to prioritize iOS and iOS apps traffic on Cisco networks. So these are things that can be leveraged by developers, in an enterprise context or even in consumer context where you're looking at doing things around retail and so on, to just to build those into your apps.
So are these videos that I would watch that are showing me how to do it?
No, these are we have resources like that. So we have tutorials in our Learning Labs platform. We have example code in GitHub, for example. So the next page in here is like, hey, here's all the web things you can do. And then let's say you want to do this Cisco Spark React widget, then it drops you into like this really quick tutorial of, okay, here's kind of the TLDR, right? I'm going to run through this real quickly. These are kind of the core elements that you need to achieve in order to embed and make like a video call in an app. And then you can go further and say, hey, I'm going to do the full tutorial or dig into the SDK or APIs, that sort of thing. So, like I said, we're kind of soft launching this. Would love to get people's feedback. If you think this is helpful and cool, then, feel free. You can tweet me, I'm just at @aroach on Twitter. So so we've been working hard on trying to do that and make it interesting for developers. I'll flip back to me so that we can. It's a place to start, and we're building I think the stories there.
So you were talking about the fact that you're soft launching that website right now, or that web page. What is our interaction with application developers right now? I mean, I assume that when they go to Cisco Live or they're dealing with DevNet online, it's not exclusively infrastructure developers.
Yeah.
We have resources for app developers right now before that thing launches.
Well, that's there. Sorry. And the URL is at developer.cisco.com/appdev, APPDEV. Okay. So it's there. You can go browse it. And so thanks for that reminder to share the actual URL. So there's a whole bunch of stuff there. I would say at this point, it's it's a little bit on the onus of the developer to kind of go and investigate a little bit and say like, hey, here's the things. But the core areas are those that I listed before, are sort of web, mobile. Let's see if I can remember them all. Location analytics, embedding video, and we have multi-cloud. So we've done a partnership with Google around connecting sort of hybrid cloud stories, where you can run a sort of Cisco scenario with Cisco Cloud Platform or Container Platform, which runs Kubernetes, which is just a pretty much vanilla Kubernetes that is optimized. And I don't mean optimized in the proprietary way. It's optimized so that you can actually move workloads between Google Cloud, GKE, and our systems, or use things like Istio to do a service mesh on top of it to connect applications or data from a cloud or an on-prem scenario and expose those to your customers in a secure way, of course, since security is like a big thing these days, and should be always. So that's like a bunch of different things. It's a little bit of the kind of laundry list of technologies, but I think we do have customers, and partners that have been doing a lot of different integrations. We tend to kind of put this out there at things like events that have hackathons. So we'll go out and we'll participate in hackathons and help people with those technologies. We actually just did one at CU Boulder. I think it was last weekend. So yeah, it's getting out there. We have to go to the developers, frankly. Even with being a big company, we got to get out there and expose people to the technologies that we have and help them out.
Do you have any idea how many developers are involved in or using DevNet right now?
So we have roughly 450,000 registered developers. To be honest, I don't have a breakdown of what that would be from a application developer versus infrastructure developer. In a lot of cases, people will switch some as well, especially now that we've got more trends towards DevOps. So, someone who might be involved in a DevOps scenario is going to do a little bit of both. So I don't have a great breakdown for you.
So that's okay. I'm just curious in the number overall. Yeah. That seems like a lot of developers. Does that mean you guys have done a huge marketing push to get this out there? Or have you just been showing up at events? Like, how has word gotten out about DevNet?
Yeah, we certainly do marketing. I mean, you kind of have to these days. The competition for developer mindshare is quite fierce. In reality, depending on which analyst you look at, there's roughly 20 million professional software engineers or software developers in the world. So that's a small community when you think about 8 billion people or whatever overall, and so developers are in high demand and they need information quickly. So that's like why the website is designed to be like boom boom boom, and so we do marketing. We go to do as much social as we can. We do this sort of stuff. So I think all of those things combined has helped us grow. I mean, we did have some base, right, from prior iterations of kind of Cisco's developer program. But I think when we started, it was around maybe 150,000, 200, I think, if my memory serves me right. So, over the last 4 years, we've been able to grow it, quite a lot through various means.
Yeah, that's still a lot that you started with. That's great.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I had no idea. Hey, speaking of marketing, I am aware that you have your own podcast.
I do.
Why don't you tell me a little bit about it? Who's on it? What's it about?
Sure. So the way to see it, I do have it on iTunes now. So it's called the DevTools Podcast with Ashley Roach. You can get through it through iTunes. You can go straight to the website, which is devtools.libsyn, libsyn.com. That's the podcasting platform that I use. And so the theme of it is, so I'm a big fan of developer tools. And so the idea here would be, if you're coding with a just plain Jane text editor and then running compilers manually and doing things that way, it's quite difficult to actually program and get your job done. So over the years, developer tools have been created. many people are familiar with things, of course, like Visual Studio from Microsoft, or IntelliJ and the various, JetBrains IDEs. That kind of developer tool, for example, combines a lot of functionality for a programmer in one place. So anyway, there are thousands and thousands of these things out there that are open source. Some are proprietary and commercial, but I kind of like kicking the tires on various ones and checking things out and learning that stuff. So I was like, cool, maybe I'll have a podcast where I interview a developer and ask them what their 3 favorite tools are for developer productivity, and then what is one thing that a developer should stop doing in order to remain productive. So that's the format. It's a little bit, to be honest, I borrowed some of that structure from there was a Cool Tools podcast from Boing Boing, and they kind of do a similar thing, but they're around just like all kinds of tools. And so hat tip to them. Hopefully, they don't get I don't get in trouble or something now. But
is it hard to stick to 3 tools? Do you have a hard time getting your guests to stick to their top 3 tools?
Yeah, it can be. So it's like we start with 3, and then usually there's like sub bullets to every single one of those. So I ran in with one guy, I think we ran through maybe 30 tools or something like that. So I'm sitting there scrambling, like taking notes on all of them, so that even though I have to listen to the whole thing again and edit and all that, it's at least saves me some time in that. But yeah, I mean, I've had folks from like Circle CI. So Travis, he was really cool about, he's a big Emacs user. So he's like, Emacs is the most productive thing ever. I've had other people that are like, oh, Atom. And it's just interesting to get people's perspectives on that kind of thing. So a lot of times, things like Spark or Slack, those always come up. I try not to do it super proprietary Cisco stuff, right? Because it's designed to be more of a kind of, hey, share the tools that you think are awesome for you. And it's not trying to promote Cisco in a overt way or anything like that.
Right.
So
do people ever talk about cloud tools on there? Or has that come up yet? Because I certainly hear it. Sure. For instance, you brought up Cisco Container Platform, and I was involved in that launch. And part of the use case we were talking through is say your logic is on-prem, in some database, but there's a tool that you love using in the cloud. Well, I'm not a developer, so I'm not using tools in the cloud, but apparently there's some fantastic tools out there.
Yeah. So I'll actually go back to Travis's interview. So he works at Circle CI, which is a continuous integration, continuous deployment product, and it's a SaaS product. So we talked a lot about the shape of development processes when you're using CI and CD. In particular, he's like, if you're not doing actual delivery to production in a continuous way, and frankly, you should only be delivering to production. He was very opinionated about it. I was like, okay, then you're doing it wrong. I may be misquoting him entirely, so hopefully Travis won't get mad at me, but it's on record, whatever he said. But he's like, look, you can do things around using like feature flags. So there's a company called like Launch Darkly. We're actually, I think one of their evangelists is coming and talking at DevNet Create. So DevNet Create's a conference that we're hosting in mid-April in the Bay Area. So anyway, so we were talking a lot about, okay, so if you're launching to production only, how do you launch beta features, or how do you do these sorts of things? Yeah. So he's like, yeah, you got to have feature flagging. You got to be able to reduce the audience size that you're going to expose that to. You can do canary deployments. So that's really, I think some of that tooling that's evolving around that, and even so Istio and Kubernetes and some of these things have some of those features in them to help software developers with kind of this dilemma, right? Of how do I launch faster? The move fast and break things. It sounds good on paper. I don't think very many developers really want to do the break things part.
Right.
In production. I understand the ethos and like what Zuckerberg's kind of saying about that, but You know, his is more around the sort of pets versus cattle analogy, I think, where it's like, hey, let's not treat this thing as the special snowflake. You know, we need to actually iterate, and we need to destroy things in order to create new things. So like sort of a Schumpeterian concept. But yeah, so, you know, those are some of the discussions we've had around cloud stuff. You know, to be honest, I haven't, beyond that, nothing else really comes to mind. I mean, we've talked, in a lot of cases, you know, developers are working on, you know, their laptops or in a on-prem environment for doing the development process. And then the cloud piece, maybe it comes in when they're deploying for test, integration testing, that sort of thing. But, you know, I know there are developers out there who do use cloud editors like Cloud9 and some of those kinds of things. So, yeah. So anyway, like I started just rebel about developer tools, as you can tell.
Well, I'm filing a request then, or at least interest. And if you do have someone who talks about those things, let me know, and I'll definitely promote it to the folks in this audience, because I think they're interested in it. We're really trying to figure out, like, you know, with this whole hybrid cloud situation, what is going to be the best use case? What tools do we need to develop to help folks make the most of what's available in public cloud, yet use their legacy, you know, databases and applications that are just never going to be in the cloud, and use all that together?
Yeah, I mean, honestly, like Twoway Street, if you have people you've already interviewed that you might think like, hey, those would be good folks on, you know, my podcast, I'm happy to do that too. So yeah, I mean, generally the way that I end up picking people for the interviews is like, I'll either meet them at a conference and they're interesting, and so I'm like, hey, you want to do this? Or, you know, or maybe, you know, it's just within my network, right? Frankly, of people that I know.
Right.
There was one guy that I interviewed who's from Mexico City, and he had some cool stuff where he was managing. I think they were kind of like a custom web app shop, and he used a whole bunch of, or they created a bunch of bot infrastructure to manage their cloud. So and this was like independent of Spark or Slack or anything like that. I don't know. Maybe he was using Slack. I'm not sure. But he was like, yeah, when we have things monitoring our applications to make sure like the containers are in good health or what have you. And then some of the bots will actually proactively go and restart something based on maybe hitting thresholds. So they'd done a fair amount of automation to mitigate some of these problems. I mean, certainly Facebook does a ton of that as well. They have a whole, like their like site reliability engineering blog and stuff, just like Google's and whatever, are pretty impressive with the kind of homegrown, cool, kind of nerd out SRE talk that they do in the applications. I mean, I think they manage something like 50,000 VMs. So like, being able to do this sort of automated, proactive, okay, we've seen this kind of profile of failure before. Now let's just kill that VM and roll a new one, or, you know, maybe it's a container or whatever. So anyway, yeah, I get into that stuff as well.
And you could never be doing it on that scale if you weren't automating, right? So
of course, yeah, automation is key.
Yeah. So as we're kind of talking about, you know, more advanced approaches, you know, we usually ask our guests at some point, you know, what are you excited about that's going on in the industry, or what are you spending time on outside of your core job requirements?
Yeah. Yeah. So actually, my job's pretty cool because I have some latitude to think about like what are cool things and what are things that I'm interested in that I think will extend to our audience. So so recently I actually got inspired by one of the projects that one of my fellow evangelists, Matt Johnson, did at a Cisco Live in Europe. So it was in Barcelona. And so he set up this this environment where you could essentially it was called the Black Hat, White Hat Challenge. So you could be a real hacker and use like Kali Linux and real hacker tools to go through and try to hack essentially consumer IoT products. And so he was able to, run versions of the firmwares on these things that were still vulnerable, and so then allow the actual person sitting down at the computer to run through these hacks. And I was like, oh, that's really cool. I've always kind of been dabbling in that sort of thing and curious. So after that, I was like, hey, like, help me out a little bit on get me oriented on this stuff. And so I grabbed Kali Linux. It's funny, I have this Wi-Fi. So this is these alpha Wi-Fi cards.
Mm-hmm.
So this is actually like the one that the hackers, use, because it's got, I don't know, you're able to inject stuff into the Wi-Fi. So I can, with this kind of card, I can actually create a fake base station and do man-in-the-middle attacks with it and stuff like that, which I was like, well, that's pretty scary, just on my, like, okay. So like, as I got exposed to some of the stuff, like, oh, here, it's like Kali Linux, it's got all this stuff around like spear phishing. So, with the hacks that were done during the, the last election in the US, there's like spear phishing tools. And so I was like, I set one of those up a little bit, and I was like, showed it to my wife. I just turned my laptop. I'm like, hey, would you think this is Google trying to get you to log in? She's like, yeah, it looks exactly like it. It's like, I was like, yeah, but look at the URL. It's like not Google. It's like a bad cert and all that. And she's like, oh. And, so that in that case, like, you just log in, it harvests your credentials and then redirects you somewhere real. And then it'd be like, sorry, your login didn't work. So you just do it again. So like all that social engineering stuff that's out there, I don't know, it's gotten me very, very curious. Also, of course, adds to some paranoia. But like, that's definitely security, and cybersecurity is a space that more and more, I think, we've always talked in the industry like security is important, right? But I think now more than ever, it's becoming very, very apparent that security is one of the most fundamental things that we have to be considering in deploying our applications, especially, public cloud, where things are, you need to have a very good security posture in those environments. So there's that. I mean, I love like, I've been doing a lot of Node.js programming for the last couple years. I love that. Although I found it's funny, like Node.js has become, it iterates so fast that it's really hard to keep up with. Sure. And it's becoming more and more like non-functional programming. It's becoming more like a object-oriented programming. So it's just kind of funny to see it evolve. And then, like Java's kind of going somewhat the other direction with things like Clojure, whatever. So, I mean, the industry is very dynamic. I like following that kind of stuff. I do like, I do a class for Cisco Lives, typically on introduction to Git, so the version control system. So, this is like, why would anyone spend their time learning more about Git? But that's one of the things I like to do. It's a bit arcane, but it's a really cool, like, elegant tool. And so I recently got an ebook that was by a guy, Ian Weil, I think, called Learn Git the Hard Way. It was like on LeanPub. And so I've been running through some of that, like the beginner stuff. I was like, oh yeah, I got that. But then it goes into things like Git bisect, where you can actually use Git check-ins to like do a bisect algorithm to get to the check-in where the bug was introduced. And I was like, ooh, that's really cool. So, it's like there's so much cleverness out there, and so much, so much cool stuff that, especially in those developer tool areas, that, I just I don't know, I get excited about it.
That's good stuff. Hey, going back to your security
yes,
chat there. What do you think about the Facebook Cambridge Analytica scandal? Should I be deleting my Facebook account?
Well, it's funny. I was going through Facebook looking at my apps that I had, authorized just before this call, because I was like, I should look at this.
Right? Part of me thinks that, and part of me just goes, that ship has sailed, babe. You have so much information out there.
Yeah. It's interesting though. When I clicked on it, when I clicked to delete one, it will not be named. And I don't think, I don't know. I'm curious to see if my stuff got compromised or, I don't know, made exfiltrated, via the Cambridge Analytica apps. But I think Facebook said they were going to create something to try to at least give you some disclosure about what data was exfiltrated. Anyway, so I was clicking on it and it said, this will delete, access for this app to the Facebook platform. Your data still may exist in the other system's platform. You need to contact that vendor in order to get it removed, learn more, right? So there was like no easy way to go, yeah, so I'm going to send some support email to, I don't know, like some startup and be like, hi, like I'm deleting my app. I would really like it if you deleted my data from your thing. I mean, at that point, what can you do? Maybe there's like 4 people and they're like, oh, this is the last thing I need to deal with.
Right. So the lesson is think twice before you enable sharing that data rather than trying to fix it afterward.
Yeah, for sure. For sure. And I thought there was also an interesting article that I read that it was, we're sort of misnaming it as a privacy thing. It's actually like a data usage problem, not a privacy problem. Something along those lines. Right, because
they weren't hacked. They actually sold that data.
Well, yeah, I don't even know if they sold it. I think that by authorizing that app to be able to access the API on your behalf or whatever, then they could pull whatever data they could pull that Facebook allowed them to pull based on what you had agreed to.
Right.
So yeah, it's like a little loophole there.
Do you think Facebook did anything wrong? I mean, Mark Zuckerberg's in the news today apologizing. Should he be apologizing? Should they have done something different?
I think he should give $1 billion to each of us that were affected. How about that? No. I mean, this is maybe the lesson of move fast and break things as a philosophy. So there is a equilibrium, right? There's an equilibrium of how do you move fast? How do you do things that are innovative? Take some risks about technology choices or how things are implemented in order to like move ahead, whereas while maintaining as much sort of, I don't know, controls or ethics that you can have. This is a human problem, right? This isn't like a technology problem, because essentially, yeah, they could have no API and lock everything down, and then that would probably solve the problem that this had.
Yeah.
This particular problem, I don't know that it would solve the ad problem, right, that they have with people putting in ads. And I mean, yeah, they wouldn't maybe be able to target it as effectively.
Right, because that's the thing, right, is they're targeting it based on what preferences you've shown, whatever you've posted, what you've searched for on Facebook, all those things, right?
Yeah, the targeting was Cambridge Analytica's targeting, right? Because they had that data, which doesn't mean that Facebook couldn't have created the same kind of targeting algorithms and platform that Cambridge Analytica did to say, like, yeah, you can target. I mean, I think they have a bunch of micro-targeting built into the platform itself. So I've never done campaigns on Facebook for marketing, so I don't know this as an expert by any means. But so what was your original question? Is Zuckerberg at fault?
Did they do anything wrong? Yeah.
Did they do anything wrong? I mean, yeah, obviously they did something wrong, because I think they may have, through omission, right, not informed us, right, as consumers of the platform as effectively as they could have around the implications of when you click public or private or log into this thing, what's going to happen to my data. And I think all along people assumed, I don't know about assume, but people had been told actually by Facebook that your private data is private and so on. And that still may be true, but by granting access through this app, it's a different context, and therefore it's a different privacy model. And people have complained about Facebook's privacy model for a long time, right? Because it's always been kind of like public working backwards to private, as opposed to like private working forward. It's sort of the opt-out versus opt-in kind of model.
It's interesting because I don't think any of our data as an individual is that valuable. This is what this brought up for me. Okay, steal Ali Amagasu's data. You get my credit cards, charge a couple $1,000 before the credit card company notifies me, or maybe you send me some ads that point me in the wrong direction. One person alone, not that big a deal. What's interesting is when you have a mass, when you have that critical mass, when you have 50 million people's data, and the ability to sway the opinions of a demographic within, America or wherever it is.
Right.
That is the interesting part to me, because I don't think we ever look at it that way. We look at, oh my God, someone's going to get my credit card numbers, or, they're going to come by my house when I'm not home, or things like that.
Well, for sure. So that starts rolling into the ethics of big data, right? And now in machine learning and, artificial intelligence, right? It's all kind of starts to get into those categories. Yeah. And it is an uncharted territory. The problem that I see is so politicians and the government could come in and do some things around regulation. I think adopting some regulations more akin to what's going on in Europe probably is maybe overdue. I think though, it's hard to judge from afar, but are the people in the positions of power to make assessments about this stuff? Are they, by majority's sake, right? They're 60-year-old white guys, right? That are lawyers.
Right.
That's who's in government typically. And shoot, you have the Cambridge Analytica guy on tape basically saying these guys aren't technologists, they don't understand, we're just gonna move forward, right? And they're not gonna know what the hell happened. I think it's a problem that we face overall, and I don't have the answer for it other than
it's just a wake-up call for all of us that, it's not, that we don't just have value as individuals, it's as a group we have value, and to certain institutions, and that, they're interested in manipulating us as a group or influencing us or whatever. That was a light bulb moment for me, and really made me go, okay, check your echo chamber, girl.
Yeah, I think we've always had that, right? We've had mass marketing for ages. It's just now it seems like it's more easily weaponized. It's more stealthily weaponized, because we're being inundated across marketing channels. The marketing capabilities are so much greater than, hey, we all get Time magazine and we all have this one page ad from this one thing, and then be like, hey neighbor, did you see this ad? I don't understand why they're calling this this person a communist, or whatever. Then you can have more conversations where it's this stuff is coming at you in just the fire hose, and so you go, it's maybe more subliminal too, where you see this stuff and then over time it builds up where you go well, I really don't like, Clinton, or I really don't like Trump or whomever, just based on seeing these things and it influencing you subtly, right? Yeah. As opposed to even explicitly.
And unlike in the magazine days, right, when we all got the same ad, now we get different ads. Our online magazine, I swear to God, Google knows some things that I'm not even done yet. I'm thinking about doing. I'll start getting boot ads when I'm thinking about a new pair of shoes. I start getting, I had owned a cat for all of 5 minutes when I started getting cat ads. It's just incredible.
Right.
So. Yeah,
I know. I don't know. I've kind of go back and forth on the should I delete Facebook concept or any of them, right? Whether it's Facebook or Twitter or what have you. I don't know. There's a lot
singularly responsible, right? If they have the glitch, I'm going to say that Twitter's just as vulnerable. So is all the rest, Instagram, all of it.
Yeah. I find a lot of utility in it in terms of staying connected to friends and stuff. I mean, I message people on Facebook that I haven't messaged in 5 years, and I'm like, hey, you know, like, it's kind of weird to message you because, like, I should be saying, like, here's what I've been doing over the last 5 years. Like, I've said this to people, and I was like, but like, I know what you've been up to, and so anyway, here's my question, you know, and people are like, yeah, totally cool. Like, we just catch up, you know, like, because of all that passive information that we've been able to gather over the last 5 years, just, you know, in our friend network. So I think one thing is curating. I probably should go back and curate my Facebook in particular, you know, my Facebook one, you know, versus like, say, Twitter. Twitter's more kind of designed to be open and public, whereas Facebook's maybe a little less. It's, you know, it's supposed to be more real connections, I suppose. Yeah.
Yeah, so, I've got a friend who I'm going to visit in the Bay Area next week. Well, I'm going up to the Bay Area for a Cisco thing next week, and I have a friend I haven't seen since I moved away 9 years ago, and I absolutely just messaged her over Facebook. I know what's going on in your life. Let's catch up and have dinner. And she's like, okay, great.
Yeah. So. I mean, that stuff's great. Or like, I'm in town and the location thing happens. And it's like, oh, Ashley's also in town. Like, and oh, wow, that's, you know, that's cool. And so I've had some of those serendipitous moments that are really rewarding. You know, it fires enough dopamine in my brain, I guess, for that I'm like, oh, I want to keep using this Facebook thing for that reason.
I want that reward again.
Yeah, but shoot, my 13-year-old, she does not have a mobile phone. We're not getting her one. I mean, she has one that's just Wi-Fi, so she'll use it, you know, at home. But she can't take it to school. Like, we're like probably high school. That's when we're gonna let her have a phone with cellular access.
That is a smart move. I gave my kid one at 11, and I so regret it. Regret it.
I mean, I regret giving her the one with Wi-Fi. I can't imagine with the mobile. And it's like,
once that cat's out of the bag, you can't. Once the genie's out of the bottle, you cannot put it back.
Yeah. Do you know the podcast Note to Self?
Yes.
Yeah, that's with Manoush Zomorodi. Yeah, she's covers a lot of this stuff, and it's hard. I've thought of like, hey, I might start a meetup here in Denver about parenting in the digital age, and it's just ridiculous how tricky it is, because you want to enable them, but you also, I mean, it's uncharted territory for us. Put in someone that's like a naive 12 or 13-year-old, maybe they're less naive than I think, you know, but yeah, it's frightening. But
they also have minimal impulse control, right? Their cerebral cortex isn't finished developing yet. So like, to have so much access at their fingertips and to ask them to regulate it, you know, for one thing, which I got over that. There's all kinds of controls on my son's phone now.
Yeah.
It's just too much to ask them and hope it works out. And so, yeah, that is brutal, that whole parenting with a phone business. The next kid is not getting her phone as young. I can tell you that. She's going to pay the price for her brother's wrongdoing.
Yeah. I mean, I got the iPad, the original iPad, and my 6-year-old or 6-month-old at the time was like, she got it, or maybe she was 18 months. I don't remember. Well, then the next thing, I had a TV that had like icons on it. And so her mental model was, oh, those are icons that I can touch. So she walked up to the TV, started touching them. I'm like, no, it doesn't work that way on that screen. Only on this screen. So like, their mental models are like formed already on how this stuff is supposed to work based on those exposures that we've given to them or that we have in our world. So pretty crazy.
And you're kind of held hostage to everybody else's parenting model too, right? Because you know, if you don't let your kid have a phone, at least in this area, at 11 years old, he's the only kid without a phone. Like, it is. Well,
my daughter's the only kid without a phone.
Yeah.
And she's like, it's embarrassing that I have to ask to borrow the phone. And I'm like, I'm sorry. You know,
first world problems, my little friend.
Just have your friend, you know, and she's like, she texts me from other people's phones. Hey, it's, you know, I'm like, okay, perfect. This is good. But there are times where I'm like, oh, I wish she had a number because I need to call her because I'm running late and I need to pick her up, you know, at this specific location or what have you.
Right.
So But
that's
so
why
far,
we got.
it's
See,
worked
that's why
out.
we got suckered into getting the phone in the first place. Was for that reason. 99% of the
Yeah.
reason the phone is used
Yeah.
is not for that. That is why we got it.
Exactly. So one funny anecdote on that is we were at the Women's March last year in Denver, and we went with some friends, and we're like sitting there, and the cell phone service was terrible because, of course, there's, I don't know, 100,000 people all hitting 4 cell towers, and they're like, well, we want to go over here, and then we want to go over here, and we're like, okay, this is how we used to do it. At a time, we're going to come back to this exact location, and then we'll be able to find each other. And people are like, oh my God, that is amazing. It's like, you don't need a cell phone, just set a time and a place. And that's where, that's how we got to parties. That's how we get back to, So it's like, come on, some of this old stuff still works.
Oh, that's so funny.
Yeah.
Well, tell your daughter to be brave, be strong.
Yeah, I won't share this with her at all.
Oh God, yeah. Oh,
yeah.
My son would die. Well, I appreciate you going down this parenting rat hole with me. I apologize to any listeners who don't have who don't have children. All I can say is take this as advice for your future children. And right. but thanks for being on the show. Can you give people your Twitter handle again in case they want to follow you?
Yeah, I'll give you a few URLs. So the Twitter handle is at symbol ARoach, AROACH. The podcast, again, you can find it on iTunes. It's just search for DevTools Podcast with Ashley Roach, and then or you can get to it at devtools.libsyn.com, and that's LIBSYN. And then do check out the new website for application developers if you're one of those people at developer.cisco.com/appdev.
Cool. Thank you so much, Ashley. It was truly a pleasure. And I hope to run into you at the next Cisco Live.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks again. Bye, everyone.
Bye-bye.